This morning, as we think about Proverbs, there are some topics in the world that are challenging. There's a lot of political talk in our world, and I was having some myself with some friends, even as we were getting ready to kind of walk our way into this morning, and the divisiveness, and there are things we don't talk about, right? There are some things you're not supposed to talk about. Politics, sexuality, religion, which is always interesting when you're the pastor in public places. We always have conversations. It's funny, I spent some of my summer traveling with Asher and La Crosse, and we'd sit and we'd have dinner with people, and it would always be like half an hour, 45 minutes into dinner, and then the what do you do for a living topic comes up, and then it's always like you can just watch people's minds going, what did I say, and am I going to hell? And I just... at one time, I'm a woodworker. It's okay. There's some things we don't like to talk about. This morning, we're going to just dive right into one of those because the Bible has a lot to say about it, and Proverbs has a lot to say about money. And it's uncomfortable. Because here's what happens the moment the pastor says, we're going to talk about money, right? You're waiting for the pitch at the end. Are we buying a new building? Are we, right? Are the coffers empty? Does Jerry need a new salary? What's coming? Am I not? And it's something that's so often associated with guilt because we're not giving enough. We can't give enough. And there's all of this, right? Am I not allowed to enjoy my latte at Starbucks? Is my 2-a-day habit at Tim Hortons really a problem? Am I not allowed to really go on vacation? Boy, should I have gone someplace our money is, and it's very personal, and we're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about why does money have such power? Why does it have such power in us? Where does that come from? What's the consequence of the fact that it has all of this power? And how can we break that power in us? If money has power, and it has power inside of me, what can I do about it? I'm going to give us some general, big sort of ideas, and we're going to start with one of those. One of the ways to tell, right? Sometimes you may come into this room and may come into the Jesus church faith thing and going, I don't know if this is real. How do I know that I'm really being changed and transformed? How do I see that the gospel, the good news of Jesus is moving and working in my life? Your money is one of the primary indicators. It is one of the best ways to be able to see that Jesus is moving and working in your heart and transforming you. Our views and practices regarding money will change as we deepen in our relationship with Jesus. All right, money has tremendous power. How do we know that? First of all, let me say this. Money is not inherently good or evil. Money is money. It's resources, right? It's stuff. But it never exists in a vacuum. Money is always possessed, right? Money is always someone's. There's never unattached money. If you find unattached money laying beside the road, guess what you actually know about it? It's somebody's. It's somebody's money. The resources always have a possessor, and in that, the person who possesses that money does 3 big things. It reveals, right? It shows, it demonstrates. We're going to talk about this here in just a little bit. It shows us where our heart is. It magnifies who we are, right? When you have money, who you are becomes increasingly clear, like a magnifying glass over a tiny little thing, right? The details of it and how it functions and works become greater when you see the money and how it works. And it amplifies, it gets it louder, it makes it clearer for more people to see. It reveals, magnifies, and amplifies your heart. We're gonna flip around a little bit. Most of these are going to be up on the screen for us today as Scott clicks through. He's going to try and keep up with me as I wander this morning. Proverbs chapter 10, verse 16 says this: "The wage of the righteous leads to life, and the gain of the wicked to sin." Now, here's what the Proverbs writer does. he draws this interesting contrast, right, between the wicked and the righteous. The wage, the gain, is in essence the same thing, right? Both people have coming in the wages of their life and their work and their stuff, right? It's coming in. But for the righteous, he says, it leads to life. But to the wicked, it leads to death. Now, the thing that would perhaps be most helpful to us at this point is to go, well, who are the wicked and who are the righteous? What does that mean, right? I mean, we've got a sense, we've got our own mind of what does it mean to be wicked and righteous, but what does the Proverbs writer mean? There's a guy who wrote one of the most famous commentaries on the book of Proverbs. His last name's Walke, and this is like his life work is studying Proverbs, and he describes it this way. He says, the righteous are someone who disadvantages himself for the good of the community. Right? This is somebody who's read all of Proverbs and quite frankly all of Scripture and tried to boil it down, and he said, listen, the description of the righteous is that someone who disadvantages himself for the good of the community. But the wicked, right, the opposite of that, is someone who disadvantages the community for his own good. So, think about it. The righteous, right, with that in mind, right, they're someone who's operating for the good of the community. So for the righteous, they're going to see any money they possess that it has some purpose outside of themselves. That it's for the good of the community. The things that have come into me are not just for me, but they're for the good of the community. Where the wicked, right, the wicked's going to see it the opposite way. Any money that has come into me is what? Mine. And, right, because it's sort of a multiplying, magnifying, revealing sort of thing, what does the wicked tend to see? Any money that's outside of myself really belongs where? Inside. It should all be flowing to me. They seek to possess it. So for the righteous, as we think about the implications of when the wages come to the righteous, right, it brings life. So for the righteous, when money comes in, it creates life. Let me just give you a simple example. If you're a righteous, right, good of community business owner, as the profitability goes up, what does a righteous business owner do? They increase the wages of their employees. They might lower their own prices so that more people can participate. They might find ways to give it away to those who have less or unable to take advantage of whatever service it is that they're offering. That's an indication of a righteous business owner. But a wicked business owner, what are they going to do? They're going to simply go, how do we maximize profits in such a way that I have more and more and more? And in essence, the wicked becomes the stagnant, dead pool. There's no life, right? Because everything is just coming in and nothing is ever going out. They're like a cul-de-sac. And it just never leaves. It's all about themselves. Money into righteous life produces life. Money into wicked life is for me and me alone. Money is powerful. Here are some ways. It brings the temptation for dishonesty. Proverbs 11:1. A false balance is an abomination to the Lord, but a just weight is his delight. Now, it's helpful, right? As we've got to think about ancient people and what a false balance means. A false balance, right? If you think of the old, like the scales of justice, right? When you would go to a store or a street market or whatever, and you're buying something, salt, sugar, meat, whatever it is, and they're trying to determine how much it is so you can pay for it, right? There was the balance. And so they would have a 1 pound weight or a 1 gram weight or whatever. They weren't using pounds and grams. I know that. I'm just trying not to bore you with ancient measuring systems. Okay. They would put whatever that weight was on this side and then whatever product you were purchasing on this one, right? And the dishonest guys would do what? They'd shave their weights. They'd hollow them out. It'd be labeled 1 pound, but it was really, 3/4 of a pound. So that you weren't really getting what you were paying for. And so when it says that the fair balance, what's he saying? That your business conducting is done in such a way that both the store owner and the purchaser, right, are all on the same playing field. If you want to pay $12 a pound for salt, that's fine as long as you're actually getting a pound of salt. Just be upfront about what you're actually giving and providing. The false balance, though, he says, is what? An abomination. It's an abomination to the Lord. Now, some of us are like, well, I don't have any false weights. I got no scale. The only scale I have, right, we've tucked back in the closet. We don't want to know. You're allowed to laugh. Thank you, Jennifer. I appreciate that, right? No, we don't have scales like that anymore. That's not how we do business. How do we false balance today, right? We manipulate numbers. An old accounting friend who used to always say that he massaged the figures when he was trying. That was the term that was used, right? There's ways. And the more we have, the more opportunity there is to get fancy. Little lies, little misdirections, little deceptions, little roundings. The Lord doesn't just dislike the false balance, though. Right? He doesn't use sort of simple, like, well, you know what, false balance in this big scheme of problems is a little one. He calls the false balance what? An abomination. An abomination. When the false Messiah comes at the end, right? When the Antichrist, like all this, what's it? There's an abomination. That is the abomination. When he's talking about sin in the Old Testament and some other places, whether it's, and in particular, it's sexual sin, and all of its variant deviances, he calls those things abominations. That's how he feels about people who do false business, who conduct their finances in a way that is designed that they would take advantage of somebody else. Money brings the temptation for dishonesty. Money also has the power to make you shallow and superficial. What do I mean by that? Look at Proverbs 11:4. Riches do not profit in the day of wrath, but righteousness delivers from death. Now, when we hear day of wrath, what do most of us think? Right? Most of us, especially if we've been in church for a long time, we might think about sort of judgment day, right? Ultimate day of wrath. God's pouring out of that. And I think that's true on one hand, but there are some ways textually to indicate that's what you mean, and they're not here. I think this is more about just a really, 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 really bad day. This is just like you got the cancer diagnosis. You walked into work today and you got fired, and now, right, and your kid, something terrible and tragic has happened to one of your children, right? The day of wrath has shown up. The day of horrificness has arrived. And when it does, on that day, you've come home and your spouse is gone and all there is a note. Money doesn't fix it. Money can't buy you the stuff you need on that day. Right? On that day, for most of us, right, we would give everything we possessed to fix some of those things. We would pour our pockets out and go, I don't need any of these things. You can have it all. Please just fix this thing that has taken place in my life. And on that day, money can't do it. It can't solve it. It can't fix it. It's not enough. It's of no profit on that day. And even worse, that so often for those who have pursued money, right? Who have allowed money to become the greatest good in their life, where they're going to pursue it and sacrifice for it, right? What are they sacrificing so often? Relationships. It leaves us, that pursuit of money can leave us hollowed out, emptied out of the very thing that we need on that worst day. On that day, right, we need character and true friends and a close relationship with God. And so often, the pursuit of the money that is empty on that day and impotent on that day has emptied us of the very thing that we do need. And living in a way that's designed to maximize profits and return on investment often bleeds into relationships, right? Because how often do we get to relationships and go, there's no return there? That person's just a suck from me, not a give to me, and I don't want to take the time and energy for them anymore. Whether that's our parents or our kids or our spouses or our neighbors, right? When we are people who think of profits and losses and balance sheets and returns on investments, and that is the greatest good in our life, the very things that we need, we become concerned with material things, with optics and with appearance and with the superficial. And on that day, right, we need things that are sure and sound and secure. We need relationships tried through fire, and we've cut them all off. Money's powerful. Money has the power to make you shallow and superficial, and money makes you arrogant. Proverbs 30, verses 8 and 9. Remove far from me falsehood and lying. Give me neither poverty nor riches. Feed me with the food that is needful for me. Verse 9, lest I be full and deny you and say, who is the Lord? Or lest I be poor and steal and profane the name of my God. Right? The rich, right? For those who have an abundance. And mind you, right? I should have started here maybe. When we think about being rich, right, many of us, and maybe you're doing it even as I'm speaking, you're like, well, I'm not rich. It's easy to go, I'm not rich, until you evaluate worldwide incomes. Until you evaluate how many people in the world actually have one running faucet inside their house of clean water. And for most of us, right, we've got a bathroom and a sink and a bathtub and a dishwasher and a faucet that comes out of our refrigerator that also conveniently makes ice. You don't realize what a gift that is until yours is broken. Ours was broken like 2 weeks ago, and every time I walked into the room, somebody went, when are you fixing the ice? I don't know. Sorry, little rabbit trail. All of that to say, right, the vast majority of us, you're rich. The vast majority of us, right, we're not worried when we go home that whether or not we're going to get to eat lunch. And we're not worried about whether or not the mortgage is going to get paid, and whether or not we've got a car to drive, and whether or not we've got, right, we're worried about how new our clothes are, and we're worried about which cable package we're purchasing, and we're worried about whether or not we've got to upgrade our internet because we've got so many devices streaming through it that we're not sure that whether or not our kid's game is lagging. My kids are laughing because that's our problem at our house. Right? We're rich. All right. Come back to me now. It makes us arrogant. Proverbs 30, 8 and 9. Remove from me this falsehood and lying. Give me neither poverty nor riches. Feed me with the food that is needful, lest I be full and deny you and say, who is the Lord? One of the great troubles of success is humility. One of the great troubles of being successful, of having plenty, is humility, is dependence, is recognizing that I am still someone who needs. Because we so often equate that we are good at making money, we're successful at these things, with we're just good. And we ask. Most of us don't ask it out loud. Most of us are not arrogant, though some of us are not arrogant enough to go, who are you, God, to demand me? But our hearts and our lives and our resources demonstrate that that is what we believe. Who are you, Lord? Pharaoh asked, who are you, Lord? Moses comes in, Moses goes, the Lord says, let my people go. And he goes, who's this Lord you're talking about? No way. These people, they're mine. They're my slaves. They're my accomplishment. They're how I'm going to get all of this stuff done. And our hearts reflect a Pharaoh heart, hard hearts in that moment. Who are you, Lord? Why does money have this power over us? Right? Money has power. I think we can see that. Why does it have that power over us? Proverbs 18, verses 10 and 11. The name of the Lord is a strong tower. The righteous man runs into it and is safe. But a rich man's wealth is his strong city, and like a high wall in his imagination. Now there's a song And if I was Kendall, I would sing you that song, but I am not. So I'm not even going to hum you the tune. But the name of the Lord is a strong tower, right? The righteous, there it is again, the righteous run into it and they're safe. But the rich man, right, he's drawing this contrast again, right? There are people whose security and safety and identity are running into the name of the Lord. And then there's the rich guy, the wicked guy, right? And what's he doing? He's running into his wealth. That's his strong tower. Now, it helps us to understand a little bit of ancient culture in cities. In ancient cultures, you either lived inside of a city where there were walls, right? Or you were outside of the city. And outside of the city, there were no walls. Which meant that a pack of animals, a marauding band of Bedouins on camels, a conquering empire force would sweep over you. Your house would catch on fire. Right, drought and famine might occur. What happened to the people outside of the city? They had no protection, no safety, no security, no identity. They were on their own. People inside the city had all of those things, right? They had safety and security. There was peacekeeping forces. There were rules and justice and somebody I could appeal to when the neighbor walked over and took my hammer. And I could go to someone who was going to make him give it back to me. If my house caught on fire, I had friends and neighbors who would show up with their buckets and help me put it out. Or at the very least would show up and help me rebuild. So much so that in this culture, the metaphor for safety and security and identity was, you live in a city. So what the proverb writer is saying is, the righteous man sees the Lord himself, his name, as his safety and his security. That was his identity. Where the rich, right, they're trusting in their own wealth. And it's interesting that the name of the Lord, not just the Lord, right? That's what it says. It's the name of the Lord that is the strong tower. What does that say to us? The song that we sang, I think it was second or third, I'm sorry, it's a song that Kendall wrote, actually, that lists those attributes of God. He wrote that song. I had warned him, this is years ago now, we were going to preach through a series in Exodus 34 where those attributes are listed, and we preached through each one of those attributes, and so Kendall wrote us a song for that. That's the name of the Lord. There's all of that stuff is present in his name. The idea is that it's the fullness of God's character. We're not just appealing to sort of big G God out there somewhere, but the named God, the specifics of who he is, right? That he is all powerful, that he's Father, that he is love, that he is mercy, that he is just, that he is omniscient and omnipresent, and right, that all of that stuff, when we run into him, we get all of who he is. All of the facets of his character is what they're saying. And if that's who he is, right, the line in that song, right, he's God, I'm not. Oh, what a comfort. Right, that's what the proverb writer is saying. On that day, right, on this day of wrath that we've been talking about, on the day when trouble comes, on the day when there's a marauding band of guys who want to take everything that's important to me, on that day, I can run in. I can run into God. Not some willy-nilly, mamby-pamby, but the very God of the universe, the Creator who spoke it. And the one who knows me exactly as I am and loves me and cares for me. If that's who he is, and he knows who I am, and he loves me, catch that. If he's who he is, and he knows me as I am, and he loves me on that day, on that worst day, I can run in and not away. I can run into him. Whether I'm the one who's made the mess or not, whether I'm the one who has sinned, whether I'm the one who has screwed up, I can run into him on that worst day because he knows me for exactly who I am. And I don't have to run away. But verse 11 is also true, right? Because most of us, that's not how we operate. For most of us, we don't run into him, we run into our money. We run into our resources, we run into our stuff. Intellectually, most of us in this room, if we were sitting around, we're having a cup of coffee, and I go, boy, do you trust Jesus? Sure. Do you think God will be there for you on your worst day? Absolutely. Right? We would process that. We would maybe even say that out loud. But where do we run when we're in trouble? What are we trusting in? We run to our money. Because money offers to be so much more, right, than just dollars and cents. Money offers to be safety and security and significance. Money offers to be God. Money is false security. Money says to us that if you have enough of me, if you acquire enough, if you save enough, if you sock enough away in a drawer, if you, right, you'll be safe. You'll be able to buy your way out. You can solve all of your troubles. But on that day of wrath, on the day of your death, on the day when your heart is broken, it's empty. It's worthless. Money inflates our self-identity. In Genesis chapter 3, when sin enters the world, right? Adam and Eve are living in perfection. They're naked and unashamed, it says to us. Exposed for one another and for God to see, and all is good. And sin enters, right? They eat the fruit, and what happens to them in that moment? They're shamed. So they go and hide, right? They're hiding behind the bush, and the Lord's solution, because he sees what is going on, is to cover them, to allow them to have something that covers them from one another. When shame enters, we don't want to be seen. We want something that covers and hides us. Adam and Eve knew that. It's inherent. It's what sin brings. We begin to be those who want to control what other people see about us. We want to manage our image. We have a radical insecurity about who we are. We're unsure of our worth and our value. And money, right? What does money promise? Just think to your favorite commercial at the present moment. My favorite are those Cadillac commercials with Matthew McConaughey, and he's got that cool guy deep voice. It sounds like he's driving with a cigarette and a bourbon, right? I mean, is there a cooler guy than that? Maybe that's just me. And I clearly am his target market. Right? And he's driving, and he's late at night, and he's all by himself. He's got the world, and he's just... What are they saying? That commercial is not about this is a great value, or there's return on your investment, or what is that commercial about? If you drive this car, you're cool. That's it. You want to be this guy. That's what money's trying to offer us. You want your image, you want to present to people. Money promises big. Right? It says to us that you're smart because you made me. And we take that, right? Not just smart because I'm good at making money, but I'm just what? Smart. Smarter than you are for sure, because you have less than I have. And I'm good and I'm successful and I'm, right? I'm better. Money is in many ways the ultimate fig leaf. And many of us are using it to cover ourselves. One of the most powerful things about money is that it reveals for us our false gods. Right? Money by itself can be their security, and it can be our identity, and it can be, right, the fortified city that we run into. But Jesus said, what? Where your treasure is, it's where your heart. You want to know what somebody trusts in? You want to know what they idolize? You know what they value, what they're believing is covering them from their sin? Look at their checkbook. Of course, nobody has a checkbook anymore, do we? Sorry. Look at their online banking account. I'm going to have to change all my illustrations for all these years. There are places for each of us Even the poorest of us, where it's easy to spend. Right? For some of us, we can spend money on food like nobody's, like you can be driving by and have $7 in your checking account and be like, I don't know, McDonald's just sounds really good right now. And some of you are like, that's the last thing I would do. So, right, some of us, it's easy to spend money on clothes. For some people, it's easy to spend money on shoes. Some people, it's easy to spend money on vacation. For some of us, right? For some of us, hear me, because I know what some of you are thinking. Sorry, it's about to come to you. For some of us, it's so easy to sweep that money right into our savings account. You're not exempt. Sorry. So easy to sweep that into our retirement account. Right? Why? And it feels good, right? Because we're told we're being frugal and we're saving and we're like, what are you really doing? You're going, my security's over here. My security's being ready for that rainy day. My security's being ready that day of wrath is going to come, and on that day, what are you counting on? You're counting on your checking account. But giving it away, right? There are places where it's easy to spend, but for some of us, spots where it's terrifying to spend it. To donate it, to give it away, to let somebody who didn't work for it take advantage of our hard work? No way. We would never. The spot where our money flows to most easily is probably where your heart is. The spot where it's easy for you to spend it is probably where your heart is. And our problem for many of us, for most of us, is that it's not just that we're stingy, right? It's not just that we aren't willing to give to things that need it. And for most of us, our problem isn't even that we overspend, because we've got some of those here too. Whether that's on food or golf or retirement or all of those things, right? The problem is that underneath what's going on there is a spiritual thing. It's not about McDonald's, and it's not about your retirement account. It's not about whether or not you like to golf. It's not about whether or not you like shoes or jewelry or fancy vacations. The problem is that underneath what is going on with our resources and our finances is a spiritual thing. So how do we break money's power over us? Right? If money's powerful, and it is powerful over us in these sorts of ways, how do we break its power? What do we do about this? I've shared before, 4 years of Bible college, multiple years of graduate school and seminary. What I never took was a class on how to preach. So when I became someone who was preaching on a regular basis, it became clear that I was not very good at it. And so I went and found myself a preaching coach. It was a guy who I respected, and he was a quality communicator. And so he and I, over the course of a couple months, I would preach, and then I would send him that sermon, and then he would spend Monday essentially telling me why I was terrible and the ways that I should be doing these things better. You're welcome for that, I suppose, at a certain point. One of the things that he said to me very early on is that preaching means you take and you find one thing, one big idea, and like an arrow, you take it and then you shoot that. And so that's kind of, anyway, maybe you can't tell that, maybe you can't tell that. That's how I try to preach now. I try to think of one big thing, and then we sort of drive it, and I ask that question kind of in multiple ways to get to the spot where we're sending that arrow. And that's where we're at this morning, right? We're at the spot. And this is, I warned you going in, money is one of those things that's hard. And part of the reason that it's hard, as we think about as I think about how do I hit you with the arrow, is that it is so easy to see people who have more than we have and think they're the ones who are rich. Or to think I'm not the poorest person in this room, and I'm not the richest, we're just in the middle somewhere. And so it's sort of easy to sort of dodge and weave and bob around the arrow that I'm trying to shoot at you. And so I'm going to tell you that I'm trying to shoot at you so that you'll do what? Stop moving and let me hit you. The Lord wants to hit you with this today. He does. He wants to take the arrow that I'm about to shoot, and he wants to jam it in your heart And he wants to penetrate and transform you. Let him. Let him today. We start by grasping the principle, right? The big idea. Proverbs 11:24. One gives freely, and yet it grows all the richer. And another withholds what he should give and only suffers want. One gives freely and yet grows all the richer. Right? He gives it away, and what happens? He has more and an abundance, right? It's someone who scatters, gathers back in. Some of you are like, I like this principle. And another withholds, right? He's the wicked guy. And it comes into him, and he holds it, and he holds what he should give, and he only suffers want. Now, if you're someone who has read more than just this morning, right? You've read lots of Proverbs, lots of Psalms, lots of wisdom literature, now out into the Old Testament, out into the New Testament. This idea that if you will scatter is the only way, right, that you can actually harvest anything, that you have to give stuff away in order for it to come and grow. That's not a just Proverbs 11 kind of idea. Like, that is a Bible idea. The more you give away, the more you get. And again, some of us are like, I love this idea. Why didn't you tell us this is where you were going, Jerry? Because I was feeling really bad and now I want this. The more you give away, the more you have. Right? So often, especially when Jesus is talking about this kind of stuff, right, in the New Testament, right, it's shared in an agricultural way, right? That if we sow our seeds, right, that there's fruit is going to come. How often does Jesus talk about the fruit of something? Paul talks about the fruit of something. We've got to scatter. We've got to give it away in order for fruit to be present. But if you hold on to it, if you don't scatter it, right, if you take it and you bury it, right, that's Jesus' famous talent parable. If you take it and you bury it, right, and you don't get anything, and not only do you not get that thing, but even that thing gets taken away from you. And again, we're fine, we're following, we're tracking, all good. Where can I give my money away? If it's going to multiply, right? And we know, some of us know, there are preachers who get to this spot, and then what's the answer? Black boxes are in the corner. Hit them on your way out. You give, and the Lord's going to bless. There will be more. I don't know how. It's a really goofy kind of thing, and I don't think it really works, and so I'm not sure why people keep trying it, but maybe guys like me, they've got better preaching classes, and so they're more convincing, but we know that's not really how it... Right? I mean, you know that. We're going to come to the spot, and we're going, this is not really what this is about. In the Old Testament, right, it's often money. And if you're generous, you'll have plenty. But if you're stingy, you're hoard, you're going to be poor. But think about the metaphor. When you sow, what are you sowing? Seeds. What are you gathering back up? Fruit. When you scatter seeds. And when you gather back up, what do you gather? Fruit. You don't gather back up seeds. See, I think the principle is you're going to scatter. You're going to give stuff away. And what you're going to get is ultimate wealth. The things that are actually important and really do matter as we scatter. It comes back as what I would call real wealth. So if you're generous to your local church and you have a healthy local church that's partnered on mission, and its mission is how do we see people that are far away from God come and connect with Him? How do we see people who are trying to walk with God gather into community and now walk together with Him? How do we see a community that's gathered together and walking together and loving its city and its community? If that's real wealth, they're the black boxes. Please, let's partner together. If you see a local food bank, right, you're going to scatter, and what do you get? You get a community where people who didn't have food to eat now have food to eat. We get things of real wealth, right, when we scatter in ways that are righteous design because we're willing to sacrifice ourselves, right, for the good of the community. We want to raise it up. Now here's where we take that arrow and we shoot it right here. You see, the only cure for broken spots of money is not just knowing principles. It's allowing the arrow to be the very cross of Jesus and to press into you in spots that you don't want to let it. Paul in 2 Corinthians 9, he's talking to the church. There's a church that's got a lot, it's got an abundance, and there's a church that doesn't have very much. And he's talking to them about who's going to give and generosity and sowing and reaping. And he says, listen, you've got to sow widely so we can, so that the Big C church, the community can reap widely. You get what you sow. If you hold on to what you have, if you don't share it, it's going to destroy you. In 2 Corinthians 8, though, he says this, for you know the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, that though he was rich, for your sake he became poor, so that you, by his poverty, might become rich. The cross, the very arrow that I'm shooting at you today, is the perfect example of scattering and gathering. If you'll let me say this intentionally in a provocative way, it is the ultimate wealth redistribution. See, Jesus sat in heaven, had been there for eternity. And he had all he needed, all that you could imagine, right? He's literally the God of the universe who can speak anything into existence. And the Word of God says to us that he emptied himself. He took himself literally and scattered himself. He treated himself like the ultimate seed that could be sown. And then there was a gathering. What did he gather? Did he gather a gold throne? Did he gather a big crown? Did he gather marauding armies and empires that would, right? No, what did he gather? He gathered you. You were the wealth to him. You were the thing that was of value to him. You were the thing that he was willing to leave the throne of heaven that he might bring you and gather you back to his Father, back to the church, back to one another. And so every week, we're good at some things around here. This is one of them. We intentionally, very intentionally say every week we are gathered in worship. It's not an accident. It is on purpose, and this is the purpose. We gather because the Son scattered himself that we might be gathered together. He sowed himself that we might be the harvest. We literally come together every week. Rain, snow, right? Air conditioning works, doesn't work, heat works, it's freezing cold in here. There have been, right? We've had weeks, some of us have been in here when we literally had to be wrapped in our winter coats and blankets around our feet, and not just those of us with bare ones. I've sat in this room when it was 96 degrees in here, and singing meant my lip was sweaty. We gather. Why? Why do we do it? Every week after week after week we bring. What are we doing? We're gathering the harvest together to declare the manifest glory of our God. To tell anybody who will listen that this is not just, he didn't just want to gather me because I'm spectacular. I'm not. He wants to gather anybody who will come. Think about all those other places that our treasure goes, right? Think about all the things that we were talking about here 10 minutes ago. All of those places demand, and increasingly so, demand your heart and your sacrifice and your time and your energy, and they want more and more and more and more and more. And right, the deeper we go into those things, the more they want, the more they demand, the more they... Jesus is the one who looks at us and says, what? I'm going to sacrifice for you. You know what has never sacrificed for you? Money. 0 times has money sacrificed for you. Your resources have never looked at you and gone, we're going to lay down over here so you can have more of us. They lack the ability. The only one of those things that we've talked about that can lay itself down and sacrifice for you, that you who had nothing can have something, is Jesus himself. Every other treasure demands your sacrifice. Jesus was scattered for you so that we might be gathered to him and to the Father and to one another. Friends, that is ultimate security. Right, when Jesus and the Father, right, they're having this conversation one time in the Gospels, and we get sort of let into the conversation they're having. And what Jesus says is, listen, the people that are inside of our hands, Father and Son together, holding these people, right, we've gathered them together. These are our inheritance and our treasure. Nothing can get us out. What a security that is. On the day of wrath, on the day of trouble, on the worst possible, really, really bad day, that will hold. And when we see the security and the significance that comes in this, money gets to become what? Money. It stops being God. It loses all of its divine quality. And money just becomes money. It becomes a tool. It becomes a thing that the Lord has entrusted us to manage and care for and, right, and resource and give away and be generous with and, right, provide for people with. Money just gets to be money again because God is God. And now I can give it away. And some of you are like, okay, here it is. Here's the pitch, right? We've gotten to the spot. All the way around the bend, here's where we go. There's no pitch, I promised. Just some questions I think we should ask. The question I think we should start with is, why don't we want to give it away more? You should be asking yourself, as the arrow drives and pushes in a little bit, why don't I want to give my money away more? Why am I not looking for ways to be generous? Why am I not seeking out those spots and those times and those places and those organizations and those needs? Why am I not someone who gives away more? When money stops being our fortified city, you will want to give it away. And in all of the ways, hear this, I genuinely say this with love, and I say it to myself long before I'd ever said it to you. In the ways that it is terrifying to give it away, it reveals that it's your God. In the ways that it is hard to give your resources away, is the revealing that it's still your God. Here's our last question this morning. I want to give it away. How much should I do? Right? I mean, some of us are like, you're just eminently practical. Give me a percentage, Jerry. So the Old Testament says 10%, right? That was the tithe. And we can argue about tithe and taxes and all kind of, right? Don't get lost in the mire. That was the minimum, 10%. You had to give it. That was the law. But in the New Testament, right, if what I'm saying to you, that the ultimate example of the principle, gathering and scattering, is Jesus himself, what did Jesus give? Jesus give 10%? Did Jesus have a measure, right? And he stuck in the heart with the spear, and like there was a bucket, and he went, oh, that's enough, and he stuck his finger in the wound and stopped it up and went, you got your 10%. That'll be sufficient. I've paid my tithe. It's not Jesus, right? Jesus, what did Jesus do? He gave it all away. It cost him something. And so I think the principle is that we should give in a way that hurts. We should give in a way that actually costs us something. I think what that means is that we should look at our resources, and if we can go, I give, but it doesn't actually change our life in any way. Right? Remember we talked a couple minutes ago about the spots where it's easy for our money to flow to. For some of us it's golf, and for some of us it's vacation, and for some of us it's shoes, and for some of us, right? Retirement. If you can't point to a change that you've had to make in that kind of arena, you're not giving enough. That's it. If you're not giving in a way that it costs you something, in a way that you can look at and go, I've had to shift this, then I think your money still has your heart. And I know this isn't easy, friends, believe me. This is one schlub talking to a bunch of other schlubs in this arena. But the beauty of this, the thing that presses us, the arrow that we shoot, is the reality that as broken as we are and as much as we have allowed our resources to be our little g gods, God knows us, and He loves us, and He pursued us anyway. And that's the offer to each one of us this morning. That in the ways that we haven't gotten this right, He still cares. He still came, He still pursued, He still gave all of Himself for you. I pray that this morning the Lord will shift and move and transform our view of our money. And before I pray, I will make this offer. I am more than willing to sit down. You got specifics. This is such a personal thing, and each scenario and situation is different. And I'm more than willing. We've got some folks who are wise at budgeting and some of that kind of stuff. And money is like one of those big, like multifaceted kind of topics. And if you've got like questions and how do I do this and boy, I really want to do this better, I'm willing to either sit down with you myself or connect you to somebody smarter than I am who will help you walk through some of those kinds of things. And I rejoice that we have a church that I know, quite frankly, wants to hear because we want to do this well. Let's pray together today. Father God, we come, and I'm thankful. I'm thankful that your word doesn't just deal with things that are easy. I'm thankful that your word shoots at us in spots that hurt, that we might be transformed in ways that show. Father, I pray for the individual or 2 or 5 or 10 in this room who do not know you, and the thought that you care about our money and have some right to it is earth-shattering to them. And I pray that in the way that Jesus was poured out for us, that would move in their heart and transform them. They would desire to know more. Father, for some of us, our finances feel like that sort of closet that we don't let anybody look at, and we surely are upset that somebody wanted to talk about it with us today. Father, I pray that your word would be the key that shoots into that door. That, Father, they would be willing to acknowledge that it is an area of their life they have not turned to you. And that, Father, as they move forward, whether it's at 1% or 2% or 5% or 10% or whatever it is, that they would begin to go, I'm going to give in a way that costs because Jesus is so good. And Father, for those of us who have been giving, I pray that in a meaningful way, in a powerful way, we would spend some time going, can I give more? Can I give more? Not because the church needs it necessarily, not because there's this great project, not because there's this thing, but because my heart is being radically transformed. Because I don't want that stuff to hold my heart and my loyalty and my love. Because I don't want my security to be there, and I'm going to show you, Lord. I'm going to demonstrate that. And I'm going to scatter it. Believing that the real wealth you'll produce, Lord, is so much more than I can do. And we pray these things in the good name of Jesus. Amen.